I want to kind of hear the backstory, a little bit of how you kind of got into this space. You guys have been doing this for about a year now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And yeah, just share your story, kind of what inspired you, why you got into this. And
Yeah, it's so interesting to look back and think about all of the different ways where it kind of all came to a head about a year and a half ago. So I had a few buddies of mine that ended up taking their lives, unfortunately. And one of them, I had this crazy experience where his face came to me in the middle of the night, one of these nights. And it actually was somebody that it had been a while since I'd seen them or heard from them. And I ended up, okay. I ended up seeing his face come to me in a dream. I woke up with my heart beating, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll reach out to him, just make sure everything's okay. I did the next day, and didn't hear anything from him. Didn't hear anything for a while, and then about 3 weeks later, I had found out that he took his own life. Wow. And for me, that was where everything started for me, with understanding the scope of what we were dealing with. And then a few friends of mine, a few years later, also took their life, and I got to this point about a year and a half ago, where there was a loved one of mine and a buddy of mine who were both having separately suicidal thoughts. They were talking about their life not having purpose, and why would they need to be here. And I remember there was a specific night where I went to my wife and I said, "What is going on? Like, I've been feeling called, you can say, sure, feeling this calling to this work of men's work and helping men to come to themselves, right? To thriving." And I remember talking to her saying, what is this the moment? Like, if I don't have any other evidence to tell me that something is wrong, that I need to do something, at least within my realm of influence, right? At least with my friends and loved ones. That was the moment for me where I knew I needed to do something. I wasn't thinking big at that point. It was more, I need to do something to just at least share my story, share the story of my loved ones, as well as, maybe I thought about apparel, because I'm a designer. I have a creative direction background. And so I thought, okay, I've always wanted to start an apparel brand. And so I thought, I want to do it with purpose. I don't want to just give people something else to throw away in 2 years. I want to provide value for people, but I want to raise awareness, and I want to give people permission to share their stories by somebody wearing something. And my friends over at Fight the New Drug really laid a groundwork for me to show like how powerful it is. The apparel that we wear can spread a message. It can start conversations. So that was kind of where I was starting. So I reached out to somebody that I had been following for a few months, named Justin Bray, and we chatted January of last year, so 2023. And I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, would love to go to lunch." He'd shared a few posts that one was about brotherhood, one was about his story with his brush up with suicide and his marriage, and I was just really impressed by his vulnerability. That's something that I value, so I really valued that in him. And so I reached out. We went to lunch, and I said, "Hey, do you want to start this thing with me?" We had an instant connection, instant vulnerability together. We were crying. Two guys at lunch at Maria Bonita's on Wednesday afternoon.
The best plates ever. That place.
So good.
Yeah. Side note.
I'm glad you recognize
There's like
that.
a weird deer head in the bathroom or something, right? Is it a deer head?
Yeah.
Something weird.
Yeah. Not sponsored by Maria Bonita's, but should be. So we're there. We're sharing stories, crying. And anyway, so that's kind of the backstory. There's so much more to the story, but what it comes down to is seeing this need in at least my realm of influence of giving people a place where they can, a safe place to land. Because I'd realized a lot of the men that were around me didn't have that, and I knew that there was a mask. I knew there was something going on. I feel like I have a pretty good read of and discernment of how people are doing. And so I wanted to provide that space for people. And as we started sharing our stories, it was unbelievable the amount of men. And we're not just talking some guys living in their parents' basements, playing video games all the time. We're talking CEOs, successful people reaching out to us and saying, thank you so much for sharing your story. It resonates so much with me. And you get an outpouring of people just opening up, just sharing their addiction to pornography, marital struggles. I'm not enough as a father. All of the things that so many men deal with, they just needed one person that they didn't even know necessarily to share their story. And so that's what we started to see is this need for so many men to have spaces to open up.
Why do you think it's been so hard for men to just open up? What's your take on that?
Man, I feel like there's so many different reasons, but I think there's been a societal shift over the last 50 years where we all of a sudden tell men that to be a man is to stuff it down. And I think there's a counterfeit there. You know, we hear a lot from the Stoics, which I very much respect and believe in, about masculinity, that we should be able to carry things. We should be able to carry things and not always react to everything, right? But I think a lot of people take that as a counterfeit that they shouldn't emote, a counterfeit that they shouldn't feel, that they aren't allowed to express themselves. A lot of men take it that way, and we know the reality, which is if men do push things down, it'll come up eventually. And I think a lot of entertainment is to blame for this societal shift. You know, a lot of these cowboy movies, a lot of movies in just the last 50 years that really make it look like what a man is one who pushes things down. They don't face it. And a million other reasons, right? I'm interested to what your take would be on that. Why?
Well, I have
it's
this
such an issue
theory that I've come up with that, like, humans will do whatever they need to do to feel safe. And I think ultimately men do want to talk. They do want to expose things, but they won't do it if they don't feel safe. And so the question then changes to like, okay, well then how do we create more safe containers, right? How do we create more safe situations? You asked me on your podcast, you know, how did you develop these deep friendships? And I really believe it's just, we just created spaces for each other to be vulnerable and authentic and to be able to talk about these things. And so, you know, you do that by going first, like you did. These guys that are coming to you or that are reaching out to you that you mentioned, it's because you've made that safe for them to do that. And so I don't think it's necessarily that men don't want to, or I don't even know. A lot of it is kind of the times, right? Like, you know, my dad, I had a really beautiful conversation with him almost a year ago now. Actually, it was a year ago today on April Fool's last year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And
there's some poetry.
I thought the whole thing was an April Fool's joke for sure, dude. Like it, absolutely. But, you know, he shared things with me he'd never shared, and he had never felt safe to do it, and things that absolutely drove his behaviors and didn't excuse them, but it, you know, sure as shit explained
Just giving
them.
some context.
Yeah. Sure. It was like, you know, one of my big motivations for starting my group was I wanted to have a place that like my dad needed. You know, I said, man, how much better would have he been as a father if he had a place like this where he could talk about what was going on and maybe get some support from some people. And so that's why, you know, it's funny because, you know, people be like, well, you know, or are you like, what's your ultimate end goal with this? And it's kind of funny. I'm like, I don't know how you feel, but I'm like, I just want to help as many people as I can.
That's
like
exactly
if I could freeze time and I could keep doing it like this forever, I'd probably take it. Like, I love it. And I don't know, I don't need this to be this giant thing, but like, so people even said like, hey, are you bugged that somebody else that has a men's group came to your documentary and is like started a group after you? And I said, I can't service everybody. I don't have the ability. Like, I just want people to improve their lives. And if he can help men that I wouldn't have reached, they resonate with him instead of me. Like, I basically borrowed the same idea from guys that inspired me. I saw other communities and groups that I was inspired from. And so I'm like, no, like anybody, like we all as long as we're doing it for the right reasons. You know, one of the problems that's out there is there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of bad actors and things like that. But you can tell with just what you guys are doing with, you know, that it's the same kind of energy with what I think I'm trying to do, which is just really trying to just help men connect on a deep level, to have support and safety and have a place they can go and talk about things that, you know, maybe they couldn't otherwise. And in that, they find healing, they find advice, they learn skills they don't have. And they have support so that when they do feel at these bottoms or these empty places, they know how to get out.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's you remind me of a friend of mine, Joe Spearden. If you know him, he has something called Utah Men's Circle, and they do events, I think, monthly. I probably am butchering that, but one of the things when I met him, he's this he's probably 6'7". I mean, he's a gorilla. He's just large. I feel like a little boy next to him. But when I met him for the first time, one of the things he said was, he said, if you go 15 square miles from where we are, we wouldn't be able to reach, you and I, we wouldn't be able to reach all these men if we devoted our whole lives to it. He said, there's so much work to be done. There's so many men that need help. It's just a waste of time to feel like competitors or to feel like anything other than we're in this together. And that was so inspiring for me because I already felt that way, but there's always in business and all these things, there's always this natural idea of competition, right? And people have asked me that, you know, whenever I'm explaining about the Heare Brotherhood, they're like, oh, have you heard of Where They're They? I'm like, yes, absolutely I have, and I love what they're doing. But I don't see us as competition. And people will always pit us against each other. People will always ask those questions, which is fine. That's the world that we live in. But I love what Joe taught me that day of there's enough to go around. There's enough men that need help just within our state, let alone nation and world that need help. And so why can't we work together and overlap and work together for these things?
Correct. Well, I learned that as a real estate agent. You know, there was about 200 of us in Utah County that really were doing most of the sales, and we all knew each other very well. And you compete for deals. You compete against each other. And if I don't get it, they're going to get it a lot of times. But what happened is I just decided that I was going to be very friendly with all the agents, become friends with all of them. And what would happen is I would get these agents would call me. They're like, hey, man, I just met with a client that needs to flip their house. I have no idea. I just want a commission. Do you want the deal? I end up making 80K on the flip. You know what I mean? Or they'd be like, hey, you know, like I had one guy here. He was one of my 2 or 3 biggest competitors. I mean, we fought for a lot of the same listings because we both called for sale by owners. He moved to St. George about a decade ago. And dude, we've probably done 30 deals together where he serviced my clients. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have a guy that knows exactly how I work, that does it the exact same way. Shout out to Brian Burnett. He's a total baller. And this dude is like, you know, I've made 6 figures because of this guy moving down there just in referral fees. And so like, instead of being competitors, I always try to look at it as, you know, and by the way, I learned this from Magic Johnson. He was at a mastermind I was at one time in California. And he taught us this. He said, the greatest thing that ever happened to me was Larry Bird. He said, every warrior needs a worthy competitor because it drives you to be your best. Like I'm going to go and look at things that you're doing and be like, oh my gosh, we need to step up our game. Or you're going to look at things we're doing and be like, oh, there's something I need to implement into my program, you know? And so like you all become better by having somebody that's helping push you and just inspire you and maybe like work in the same field as you. Sure. But like when you just think that you've got everything figured out, you start to get lackadaisical and quit giving less than your best.
Absolutely. And I think that's such that's when ego gets involved, right? That's when we start to say, like you said, I know it all. And that's usually when leaders run things into the ground, right? They stop listening, they stop learning from other people around them. And it's funny you bring all this up because I obviously have seen a lot of the work that you've done and been so inspired by the way that you guys treat those in your community. There's so many out there, so many groups out there that I think have amazing intentions, and I honor the work that they're doing. But when I saw what you guys were doing, I was very inspired because I think there's a gap of men that aren't being talked about, and it's the ones that don't want to go in the woods and eat raw liver. And then there's on the other side, there's people that are trying to get rid of gender and are calling masculinity toxic, right? Yeah. Everybody else in the middle, the 95% of men, they need
99%.
Sure, yes, 0.9 we could even say. They want a place, and they need a place. We all need a place to belong.
Well, and it's Chris Williamson said something the other day. I was talking with him, and he said that the problem is we have mistaken what is loud as what has value. And so on the internet, you get things that like just get attention, right? Just because something has attention doesn't mean it's valuable. Right. And so you see a lot of these people like Liver King or whatever, just like the stuff that catches your eye, like, whoa, that's crazy, right? Yeah. Or on both sides of the spectrum, when in reality, the majority of the things that make sense is somewhere in the middle. And so for you, what have you experienced as far as like run this group? What are a couple of the methods or things that you do? Like when somebody signs up for your program, like what are you doing to help them essentially start this healing process?
Yeah, so we there's all kinds of modalities that we want to expose to our guys, because for one, breath work will be their catalyst for change. It will open the doors for them. On the other hand, partnering with an MMA, kickboxing, gym, something like that, combat sports has been helpful for other guys. And so that's part of what we like to do, is just expose them, like similar to what you guys do, just expose them to as many different resources as possible. And so, we got started, actually we did a cold plunge on Saturday. And it was kind of the anniversary of part of my story. And so every year around April 1st, I like to do a big cold plunge in the Provo River, because that was part of what got me out of my dark hole that I was in. It woke me up. That and some coaching from the guy that led it, who led me to change my brain, really. I mean, he did some mindset work. Within 15, 20 minutes, he convinced me that I could overcome whatever was going on in my head.
How long ago was that?
It was 2 years ago.
Wow, just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And what was going on for you? Like maybe try to describe that. Like, 'cause I think there's so much power in that. I think so many people find themselves in a similar situation and don't know how to get out of there. So if you could maybe go into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'd been laid off like 6 or 7 months previous to this moment, about 2 years ago. And it was a job where I felt like I was killing it. And I had put so much of my identity into that, or it had become so much a part of my identity, is what I should say, that when that was taken away from me, all of a sudden, who was I? And I think a lot of men resonate with that, with tying our identity to our work. Instead of just who we are, it's what's the question we always ask each other? Hey, what do you do? Instead of who are you? So for me, in that moment, about 2 years ago, it was a perfect storm of that. I wasn't taking care of myself spiritually. I wasn't connecting with myself, with God as much, and with the people around me. And this is 2022, so we're on the tail end of the pandemic, not realizing as a world how much it was affecting us, in isolating us, and the overabundance of screen time and all that. It was just a perfect storm, especially the physical, spiritual. I wasn't taking care of myself at all. So it all kind of came to a head at once. And I actually had a few friends that probably similar to some of the experiences that you've shared, that they noticed, some good buddies and my wife that were conspiring behind my back. And will always be grateful for that. And he invited me out to come to CrossFit. I had another friend who invited me to a cold plunge, and I bailed on him like 3 times before I actually went. I finally booked my first therapy appointment. It was the collective group. There were quite a few people that were working behind the scenes to make sure that I was okay. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful things about my own story. The things that I'm most grateful for is it was brotherhood. It was brotherhood that got me out of my darkest place, and God. I don't want to leave him out, because all of that happened because they were listening. In my opinion, they were listening to what God was telling them, which was John's struggling. He's in a dark hole. They could tell. I'm an open book. I'm not one of those guys that can just push things down for years, and they could tell. So that's a part of the story. It's not the cold plunge that did it to me.
Right.
what it was is the brotherhood that showed up for me, that pointed me to resources to wake me up. And so there's so much more to the story, but it's an accumulation of all of the things where I wasn't connecting with myself, with God, and with others. And I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day is all of our problems come from the lack of one of those things. We're either not connected with ourselves, we're not connected with a higher power, or we're not connected with each other. And I was lacking in all of those things. I wasn't taking care of myself.
No, well, one of the things that your friend did that was so brilliant, is sometimes we just have to find an excuse to be able to have a vulnerable moment with somebody, right? And that's part of the reason. One of the things I always say is like, I just try to create as much FOMO as I can so that nobody will miss the event. Because if I can get you there, you're going to get inspired. You're going to have the aha moment like you had. But the trick is you have to get you there. And like you even said, it took, you bailed the first 3 times. And so a lot of times people, they want to change somebody, they want to help somebody in a spot. And it's like, I'm going to give you some really bad news. Like, you're not going to change anybody. However, if you can create an environment where they can be inspired, and he gave you some new skills or just some new information where you could look at something from a new angle, just a new perspective that really started that change for you.
Yeah. Well, and even furthering that, one of the things that was the most powerful for me was accountability and waking up to accountability. They loved me enough to tell me that I wasn't being accountable for my life. I was blaming.
They had some tough conversations around that.
Yeah, and in a very compassionate way. They weren't screaming up in my face, right? They were pulling it out of me with so much love. And that was part of it for me is they pulled it out of me, and then it was this realization that I was blaming the boss, the wife, the kids, for being tired, for being laid off, for all these things. All of a sudden, something that I thought I believed in, which was accountability, I wasn't actually living. I was blaming everybody else around me in my head for my circumstances instead of realizing that it's number one, me that needs to get out of this.
Well, it's such a powerful reframe, because anytime you think somebody else is the reason that your life is not working, you literally give up power to change it, because it's somebody else needs to change. Like, that doesn't work. And so it's so empowering when you just take ownership. I love Jocko Willink in Extreme Ownership, right? And he's a little bit excessive. He's like, yeah, I was sitting at a stoplight and a car hit me going 30 miles an hour, but it's my fault. I'm like, well, not everything, right. But sure, you can take accountability for it. And, but my point is like, I was reading a memoir the other day, and it was somebody pretty close to me. And as I'm reading this, it's like they were just blaming all these different people in their life for kind of different things. And it made me sad. I just like felt disconnected from it. I'm like, I don't even resonate with this kind of thinking. Like, it just does not work for me because it's so disempowering. And so I think the first step to making any change in your life is really just making that decision that, you know what, this is my fault. I tell people, like, everything that's going on in your life, you are the architect of it. You are the one that, like, for better or worse, your thoughts, your beliefs, the people you spend your time with, the things you read, the things you listen to, like, it's all created this moment.
It's all part of it.
And, when people make a really bad decision in a moment, it wasn't that bad decision that got them. It was the 1,000 little decisions that they could have made a better decision had they made better decisions over here for the last little while.
Oh, absolutely. And as I was being awakened to my lack of accountability, there was even a point, and he was talking to the whole crowd at this point. There were 5 or 6 of us on the bank of the river about ready to get in. And one of the things he said was, even to the point of abuse, even to the point of somebody mistreating you, even to the point of all the kind of unmentionables. And those aren't your fault, but you do have to take accountability that they're a part of your story. And that for me was so powerful. At first, actually, it kind of made me mad because of some of the people that I love that have dealt with abuse and all kinds of things. And but when he talked about that, you think, okay, there's something there. We are accountable for how we respond to them. We're accountable that they're a part of our story. And sometimes those are hard pills to swallow.
Well, I love what Tony Robbins says about that. He says, look, you are a victim. And it doesn't serve you to play in that story. So how much longer do you want this story to control your life? Like, you have to take accountability of what you do now. Like, sure, you're a victim. Awesome. And if you stand up, like he goes, people will fight so hard for their story. they'll fight so hard. Well, I can't because I was raped or I was abused or I was molested or whatever that, I mean, horrible things, the worst of the worst, right? My parents were killed, you name it. But ultimately it's like, you are a victim and it doesn't serve you to be there. So at what point do you want to go, I'm no longer going to let that story control the rest of what I do? I had this moment with one of my guys. He suffered a lot of abuse as a child in every way. And he made some poor decisions last summer, and I kind of had a tough conversation with him, and he started bringing that up, and I said, dude, it's been 30 freaking years. How much longer are you going to let this run your life? And at first, same like you, he was kind of mad. I said, dude, you absolutely are a victim. And if you want to play that, if you want to be in that space, nobody's going to blame you. You can be there for the rest of your life. You know, we just had Chad Hymas speak to our group. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, he's in the wheelchair.
Wheelchair, Hall of Fame speaker.
Yeah, okay.
He got, 27 years old is when he got paralyzed. And he said for the first 5 years, he just was in a dark place, didn't want to do it. I mean, quadriplegic, arms, legs, the whole thing. Thankfully, his shoulders work, so he can actually use his shoulders to move his arms to do things. It's crazy. But I just had him on the podcast, and, you know, it was the same kind of thing. His dad was basically like, this can be your story. No one would blame you. Like, if you want to just be that, like, sure, like, that's you. But how are you going to serve the world like that way? How are you going to, you know, like, that's what you want to be out of this? And so we have to take this decision, like you said, where it's like, okay, I absolutely can see that this was not in my favor. Like, some things happened that were not ideal. And I'm done being a victim of that. I'm done letting that control what I do next.
It's so powerful, the moment when you can take accountability. It's so freeing to know that I'm in control of my story. Yes, I won't be able to always control my circumstances or the atmosphere that I'm in, but I can control my life, and I can be the author of my life and the author of my story as much as I possibly can. And you know, I'm a big believer that God is a big part of that too, right? About how that all plays out. But I'm grateful that He gives us the power to be in charge of it. He cares about what we want. And I think that's powerful to know, and it's so freeing. The moment when you realize I am in control of my life. It's also really overwhelming, but it's empowering and it's freeing. And that's a big part of my story at that moment. Going back to the Provo River, April 1st, and feeling like I didn't have anything going for me at that moment, and all of a sudden, I felt like I had the world at my fingertips. In fact, about 2 weeks later, after this cold plunge and this whole thing that happened, I was on a phone call with these guys that were leading it. These two coaches, Ryan and Preston, some of my good friends to this day. And I called them and I said, "Hey, I left my job." And they're like, "Whoa, like, we didn't mean for that to happen. You got to ease into that." But I felt so on top of the world. There had been so many things going on in my head for so long that it freed me. It felt like it freed me. And in a little way, it healed me from some of the things that I had felt about myself for so long, and some of the limiting beliefs that I'd had about myself and about my potential. And so that was really the catalyst for me leaving my job, which launched me into a whole new chapter of entrepreneurship and taking actual control of my life, which has been both heaven and hell at the same time. One of the most difficult things in my life, in my marriage, and all of those, in every aspect. But it's also been one of the greatest things that's happened to me because of that accountability and what it's allowed me to do as an entrepreneur. And, you know, fast forward to the story of last year when I met Justin Bray and then our other partner, Mike Allen, who ended up coming on not too long after. He taught us breath work. He'd been doing men's retreats for a few years, and I really loved his approach. It was very holistic. It was very well-rounded, his breath work sessions and retreats. And going back to the question about, you know, the different modalities and the things that help a lot of the guys that we're dealing with, that are in our community, breath work has been one of the biggest catalysts for a lot of these men. And it's a big part of my story. I went to my first retreat of my partner, Mike Allen. He was already doing them. Me and Justin went, and now our other partner, Jason Rogers.
There's 4 of you running them now?
Yeah. So there were three that's where the four of us were all together for the first time. And it was, let's see, not that it matters, but let's see, it was the end of April last year, right before we launched Heare Brotherhood on May 1st. So we had this retreat, and that's where we experienced breath work with Mike for the first time. What that did for me and has done for so many, and I know you've experienced this, and a lot of your guys, is it forces you to be still, and it forces you in a way to face the music. All of these things that men do as we push things down, and instead of having it all bottle up, eventually at the expense of our marriage or at the expense of whatever, it allowed me to face what I needed to see. It allowed me to face a lot of the issues that I had been pushing away for a long time, and allow me to actually take action because he provided that space for me to have that. And so I'm going all over the place, but this breath work has been so critical for my journey. And it's funny, I used to think it was kind of hippie stuff. There's all kinds of things that I used to think were hippie stuff, and that doesn't really align with either my faith or my personal values, but as I've stayed curious, that's been one of the greatest things to ever happen to me, because I've learned so much. And I see so many things that maybe I don't agree with, on social media with certain men's retreats or with other groups that I may not necessarily agree with, but that's not me. It might work for other men. And so I've gotten to this point where I'm just so grateful that there's so many different people with different backgrounds and with different stories and different things that have worked for them to get to the point where they are, because they're going to start finding people that are just like them and find people that they see reflected in them, the opportunity to change. Yeah. And I think that's so powerful that there's so many different methods and modalities out there to.
Well, it's one thing I was going to ask you. So you're active LDS, correct?
Yeah.
And so, because breathwork's still not frowned upon, but kind of looked at different by, religion in some aspects. So how has your community your LDS community reacted to you kind of exposing some of these more different modalities of spirituality? Well,
so going back to Mike, my partner, he's also an active member of the church, and he's the definition of being curious, and I love that about him. But he and myself included, we try to really align with what we believe is a part of our faith, and that doesn't mean that we're like only going to do things that they've said yes or no about, right? But there's a lot of gray area, right? And there's a lot of where they try and leave it up to us, right? Yeah. And that's one thing where, again, I used to think it was hippie stuff, and what worked for me was
by the way, it is hippie stuff, but the hippies had a lot of things, right?
they were right on a few things, yeah. Right?
It is funny to look back at like why the hippies were so shot down by the government. Like all they wanted was no war. Like They wanted people to love each other and not have war. That's how it really started. And then anyway, but it's a whole nother tangent. But
no, well, there's something to that. Yeah. But Mike's approach to it, he brings in Buddhist ideology. He has some quotes from Latter-day Saint leaders, from other Christian denomination leaders. He brings in science. It's so well-rounded that I don't know if anybody can argue with the idea of breath work. And for me, as an active, Latter-day Saint, what really got me was he was bringing quotes from David O. McKay, if you know who that is, right? Like one of the past prophets or some of the leaders of the church, where I'm like, oh, they have talked about this, and they actually said
David O. McKay talked about breathwork.
Well, he talked about meditation and the benefits of it, and other things where Mike talks about breath, and so he talks about the meaning of breath and how that's anyway. Well, he goes into it.
I've always said the temple experience. The reason why it's such a beautiful experience for people, it's the world's greatest setting for meditation. That's really what it is, It's like, for being real.
You don't have your phone. You don't you're in this beautiful
and you're
place.
Very intentional about why you're going and what you're trying to get out of it. It's the same kind of thing. I actually had a bishop on here last year that, while he was a bishop, went and did ayahuasca. I don't know if you ever listened to that podcast or whatever, heard about it, but he told me, the leaders called him in afterwards, And they actually said, as long as it's not illegal where you do it, then you can do it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so he went to Costa Rica where it was legal. And so, you know, a little bit after that, he wanted to kind of get into, he was a legislator. And so he also wanted to kind of help the bill. He knew how much it can help with trauma and some of these suicide issues and things. And Utah actually just passed, I don't know if you saw that, the bill that they are allowing now MDMA therapy and psilocybin therapy under a couple different hospitals and groups. Yeah, super pumped on that because it is for people that have deep trauma, I don't know anything better. Like there's nothing better out there.
Yeah.
But anyway, and so he said that the church, they said, we don't want you to talk about any personal revelations you got from it.
Right.
And it has to be legal. Those were the two things that basically they said to him.
That's so fascinating.
For what it's worth.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Well,
Yeah.
and that's actually been such an interesting part of this all for me is, as I'm staying curious, how does it align with just my personal beliefs in general, right?
Yeah.
But also, how does it align with my faith tradition, right? And it's not to say that it's like whatever they say, I'm just I'm never going to question or be curious about it. It's like, okay, well, let's just see if this aligns. And that's really important for me. And not everybody's going to feel that same way, right? That
is a great question though, you know, like, does this align with me? And I think as long as you're staying in that place of like, because when you know that you're aligned with God, and if you got there by religion, then you're perfect. Like, you know, keep going. And if you're not, then you have to go, wait, why am I off? Why am I not aligned with God? What's off here? Is it my personal decisions? Am I not living the religion that I'm living? Or is it the belief itself that I have around what I'm doing? You know?
Well, a good example of this actually that we've dealt with just a few times, but when somebody joins the community, they sign, it's a Heare Brotherhood oath. And, you know, we went back and forth about that word just because there's a lot.
Be a triggering word.
Yes. Oh, there's so many people that are like, an oath. Like, what are you guys doing? Like slitting
Little
wrists
Captain
and
Moroni style.
Well, you're right. Oh man, there's been a lot of.
Did you see the new movie that came out, The Oath?
No, I heard about it, but it actually looks.
It was. I went to it with a couple of my buddies. It was fine. Okay. I had the director on my podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's good.
Yeah, I need to see it. But when I saw that, I'm like, they took our thing. We always talk about the oath. No, I know we don't own it, but yeah. So and when people come on, they talk about the oath. We have them sign the oath, and it's nothing controversial. It's I will be my brother's keeper. It's I will reach out when I am in need, and I will be there for my brothers who are in need. It's basically this document that sets the grounds for the community. It sets it with intention. And my partner Justin Bray, he is the one that really penned it and authored it. We worked on it a little bit, and then. He has a kind of a crazy cool story where he just kind of woke up one night feeling like, feeling a lot of these words come to him, and he just wrote them down, and it kind of came out as this beautiful oath. And anyway, going back to this, you know, there's a scripture I think in the Bible that says, you know, don't take any other oaths before me, something like that. And so I've had some people reach out and they're like, I love what you're doing, but in the Bible it says this, and this is one of those moments as an example of. Does it align with my faith or not? I think context matters. I think language matters. And so when you look at the word oath, what did it mean when they were writing it in that scripture, right? What they meant there's a lot of different meaning behind it, but the intention of what we're doing is also important, which is it's not an oath where it's like, if you don't follow the oath, like you're dead. Which was what an oath meant in that time period, right? But for us, it's like, it's a pledge. It's a terms and conditions, basically, with a really fancy name to put. And I don't mean to like belittle the commitment, but some people get so caught up on words and verbiage that they don't commit to something because of it. And so anyway, so that was an interesting example that we've run into a few times of people that they're like, well, I'm, you know, in my evangelical faith, in my whatever faith, we can't ever sign to an oath, which is, you know, it's fine.
I had a buddy that somebody was trying to get him to sign up for a group, and it was an oath too or something, and he was just out. Like I remember him being really worried. He goes, I only kneel to God or whatever. It was just like, it was to him, it was like, and I remember like thinking about it, I was like, I didn't even think twice about it. But like, you know, some people, I can see that.
Yeah. And which is fine.
But like also there's power in just being able to commit to something, right? And you're going, hey, I am like I'm in, this is what I'm committing to. I absolutely believe this, you know, and I believe in having a mission statement and, you know, and mottos, and, you know, we are the they is a motto. It's like, no, we don't wait for other people to do something. If we see a problem, we are the they. Like there is no other people coming to do it. And so it's like kind of the same thing, but like I do like the idea actually of just, having it very clear of like what you're signing up for.
Yeah. Well, and I think it sets the intention for what we're trying to do. At our retreats, at our events, we usually will start with the oath, because then it kind of helps, going back to when we were talking about small talk. It kind of cuts the crap to get to the point where it's like, okay, this is why we're here. We're here with intention. We're here to serve each other, to pour into each other. I have a coach that Steve Weatherford. He talks about compete versus complete, and so much of male culture is all about competing, and I love that he turns it on its head and he says, we're here to complete. And that is, I think, masculinity at its finest is when we seek to complete each other instead of competing with each other. I love that concept. I love that idea. It's such a simple saying, but it goes a long way for me.
That's cool. What does hear mean?
Yeah. So, it's the combination of both spellings of the word hear. So like I'm here in this location, I'm here, and then I'm hearing, I'm listening. So it's, HEAR, listening, and then HERE, here in this spot. We combine those spellings because we like the phrase that I'm here to hear. It's this idea that I'm here, I'm present with you, I'm listening, but it's also I'm here, like I'm alive, celebrating life and the reason to be alive. So there's a few different meanings packed in there. We just put the spellings together because we were going with one or the other and seeing which one was more important. But we realized putting them together, we can say, I'm here to hear. So that's the simple, I guess, reason why. Also, it really helps with URLs and social media because
nobody else has it.
Right. Yeah. So that's the meaning behind Heare Brotherhood.
Very cool. And how many members do you have in your group now?
So we have we have an app. It's just the Heare Brotherhood app. And I think there's about 7,000 now on there from all around the world.
You've downloaded the app and using it.
Yeah. And it's been, one of the things that has surprised me the most being a part of this community myself is how universal what we're dealing with is. You've a lot for a while. I thought this was a huge issue in like just America, or because you look in other countries and they have different customs and they have different, some countries are touchier than others. I served my mission in Argentina, and the men over there, they would go and they would give besos on the cheeks. And when we first saw that as 19-year-old missionaries, we're like, what in the world?
They ever do that to you as a missionary?
Yeah. And it was weird for a little bit. And then you realize how natural it was. Right. And then you come back and you're like, you come back to somewhat cold America.
There was one of my favorite moments of my whole mission. This like really pretty, she's probably 18-year-old girl went to do that to my companion. He was like a month in the mission.
Yeah.
And he literally fell over backwards to avoid her kissing him. She was beautiful too. And he literally fell off his chair, and the girl was so fit and she just went inside and we lost the appointment. I was like, oh no. But it was because she went to give him a beso on the cheek. But it just reminded me of that.
Got to be obedient, right?
Yeah. It was pretty funny.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So, there's so much need around the world for men to have a tribe, for men to have a community. It doesn't matter where you're from. It might look different in every country because of different cultures, but the need is there.
Agreed. What books do you recommend to men to read? What are some that have inspired you?
Yeah. Ooh, good question. One of my go-tos is Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. That for me was transformational, as well as I think it's a companion book. Maybe I think it's called Fathered by God. But I love that he focuses on the heart, and he focuses on what every masculine heart needs, and a big part of that is adventure. And in our relationships, in our work, in everything that we do, we need adventure. It's ingrained into the male heart, and when you don't, that's when the heart dies. So we look at the last 50, 60 years of all these guys who are on their keyboards for 10 hours a day, which I've been a part of that culture as well before. And something in you dies because you can be having cool things happen with work, but if you're staring at a screen on a keyboard all day, every day, it's hard when you're not doing much outside of that because you're so exhausted from sitting there all day. It's hard to find adventure. And that's just one example.
No, I love that. Well, I've made that a huge part of my program as adventure.
Yeah.
Like, it just gives you something to feel alive. We did boxing a couple of weeks ago, and one of the guys, he's one of the older guys in the group, got punched in the face and got a fat lip. And, but we're going about 70%, but you still took a decent punch. A lot of these guys had never been punched. And he was going to sit out the next round. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I got a fat lip. I was like, get in there. This is a leadership group. And he did it again. It was awesome. And afterwards, he gave me this big old hug. And he's like, I was like, admit it, that's the most you felt alive since we went around with the bulls, dude. He's like, it is.
Yeah.
But you have to do things that just make you feel alive,
You do. And I can't remember where I read this, but at some point, somebody wrote that, a lot of times men or women will bond, or they'll go deep by face to face. They're okay to sit face to face, talk, and not that men can't do that, but normally men do it side by side in an adventure as they're fishing, as they're hiking, as they're biking, and that has really stuck with me because that feels, that might sound stereotypical, but it is true for a lot of men and a lot of women that is how they bond. That's how they go deep, is through adventure, through action, through moving forward side to side in something together. So going back to your other question, books and I guess resources, one that has been pretty transformational for me over the years has been the Art of Manliness blog by Brett McKay. I love that place because it's a very well-rounded approach to masculinity. You've got fighting and how to be a warrior, and then you've also got how to be an artist and how to be in touch with your creative side, and it's so well rounded to me. And I think that's what is lacking in the conversation of masculinity today is this talk of the well-rounded man. There's so much focus sometimes on physical, or some people focus too much on spiritual. It needs to be well-rounded. I love the idea of the Renaissance man, who's equal parts warrior and artist.
Yeah.
And I think that is what is missing in a lot of the conversation that we see online about masculinity. So I love Art of Manliness and their approach to masculinity in general, mental health, just the resources there are amazing.
Awesome. And for people that want to download your app or find more about you guys, where's the best place to instruct them to go?
Yeah, we do a lot on LinkedIn. That's kind of where it all started, funny enough, because a lot of conversations like that don't happen on LinkedIn, which is probably why it stood out. So we have a page there, but we also have our website, hearbros.com, HEARE bros.com, as well as the app. You can download it, go to Google Play or App Store, and just search Heare Brotherhood app, and they can download it there. We also have a podcast, the Heare Brotherhood podcast. I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, on Instagram, we're Heare Bros, and I feel like I'm missing something.
Your personal Instagram?
Oh, personal, yeah. John Moore, but M00RE.
Oh, you really screwed yourself on that one.
Right, I know. I have such a common name. Like,
that is a common name.
Easy for you, Jimmy Rags, right? John Moore, it's like two of the most common names. So yeah. Got to get creative there.
I like it.
So that's where you can find me on Instagram, and I'm posting a lot on LinkedIn as well.
Well, thanks for all your work, man, and just for being there for guys and for being a source for people to go find connection.
Well, thank you for having me on the show and for being such a good leader for so many of us that are all on the same mission.
Awesome, man.
Appreciate it.